Cool. Welcome. My name is Antonio Vecchio and I'm the Consumer Engagement Lead at the Spinal Research Institute. In today's conversation, I'm delighted to have a chat with Pádraig Carroll, who is a PhD student at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland and in the University of Medicine and Health Sciences in Dublin. Pádraig was also a contributor with a piece in our recent publication, Why Research Matters, where we showcase the diversity of spinal research occurring around the world. Welcome, Pádraig.
Hi, Antonio. Thank you very much for having me.
Yep, so I guess my first question to you is I'm always really interested is a bit about your background and what brought you to spinal research specifically, because there's so many areas of research out there. So what was it about spinal research?
So great question and a great place to start. My own background would be in psychology. So I completed my undergraduate degree in Cork, which for everyone who doesn't know is in the south of Ireland. So I completed my undergraduate degree in psychology. Following that, I went to Galway, which is in the west of Ireland, to complete my master's degree in health psychology. And when I was doing my studies there, I became more familiar with patient and public involvement, which is the center of my work. And from my interest and studies in patient public involvement, I was able to get a placement in a cardiac rehabilitation center called CRE. And CRE is the Irish word for heart. So it was very aptly named. And CRE and the university I was in NUIG, had a very good collaboration together. So I was able to get that placement to do some PPI, some patient and public involvement during my studies. And when I say patient and public involvement, just to clarify, I might be referring to consumer involvement or similar work. So after my studies in Galway, I ended up in Dublin here at RCSI. And so now I'm in the East. So, I've done a fine tour of the country at this point. The position came up. I saw the advertisement for the current project I'm on, which is patient and public involvement in spinal cord research. And that really suited my interests. So I joined roughly 1 year after the project was established. And I was able to bring in my PPI experience with and my work in patient and public involvement.
Awesome. And yeah, definitely in my role, I very much appreciate the value of consumer engagement. In your piece as well, part of that project, you spoke about bringing together a panel of different stakeholders. Could you maybe just give us a quick rundown of how that happened, who they were, and I guess the outcomes that have sort of occurred as a result of bringing different people together?
Yeah, absolutely. And a great question again. So just to give a brief background as to this panel and to explain what it is and where it's situated. The work I do, patient and public involvement, it supports a larger collaborative project between the Irish Rugby Football Union Charitable Trust, the Advanced Materials for Bioengineering Research Centre, and a team of researchers here at RCSI. So the goal of that project is to develop an advanced platform for spinal cord repair. And as that project is supported by the IRFU Charitable Trust, it would only make sense that some of the injuries treated by this project would be those experienced by rugby players, such as spinal cord injuries. So from the establishment of this project, the PI, Professor Fergal O'Brien, who is the Director of Research and Innovation here at RCSI, he recognized the importance of embedding PPI in this project from the outset. So Professor O'Brien asked Dr. Michelle Flood, my own supervisor, who already had some experience with carrying out PPI and in projects similar to this, in order to make sure that our PPI was done properly. And from that, there is a position created for myself to come in and develop and use my own knowledge of PPI. So when I came in, the panel had been formed, and this panel that I was speaking of is a panel of researchers, clinicians, and seriously injured rugby players who all have spinal cord injuries. And there are consumers, to use your own terms, or public contributors, as we call them, So this panel meets every 6 months to discuss the project and conduct various specific PPI activities. From the earliest stages of this project, it was all about kind of everyone getting to know each other and learning to work with each other. And now, 2 years in, everyone's able to contribute and use these meetings as a forum to discuss research.
Now, that sounds really exciting, and obviously getting the different perspectives of the different stakeholders is really interesting. That's actually one of the things I really enjoyed about your piece, that you're able to, showcase that even though spinal research can be quite specific sometimes, yet the same piece of research is interpreted differently by different stakeholders and obviously consumers and researchers. From your own perspective, how have you found, I guess, working in parallel with consumers? And is there anything that, is there a perspective that they've given you that you may not have thought yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's a really good point. And I suppose there's kind of, to answer a question like that, I kind of step back and kind of give you two examples. First of all, working on a panel with people with spinal cord injuries has really I suppose provided context to the research that we're doing, and given real world examples of where our research will come into play. Specifically, I'm carrying out an interview study at the moment, and that study consists of me speaking on the phone with men who have spinal cord injuries, which they receive playing rugby, and discussing research and spinal cord research and how they see their role in spinal cord research and the areas they feel like they could be involved. And one of the really cool and really interesting quotes I got from that, from one of the gentlemen I interviewed, he said that he'd rather have 1,000 things fixed before being able to walk again, which I found really interesting because, so often you kind of presume that being able to walk is the first priority and the be all and end all of spinal cord research, where for this gentleman, I think the most important thing for him was that if he could be able to make himself a cup of tea with no problems. And that really opened my eyes personally to the value that a project like this and the value that PPI has and the value of getting to work with people who have these injuries can bring to a larger research project. Because like I said, it gives context and it grounds us and it makes sure that the research we're doing actually addresses the needs of those people who are most likely to benefit from the research. From another point of view, I have great confidence from one of our panel members, one of our public contributors, Mr. Kieran McCarthy, who has actually come in with me on lectures and on talks on PPI, and the panel that we have here that discusses the spinal cord research and sets the priorities. And part of this process is that he comes in on these lectures and we can bring him in, one of our researchers, and ask a series of questions to himself and one of our researchers to kind of give a comparison of the answers that they would have. And that kind of shows how everyone's backgrounds and experiences can kind of shape the way they might view a question or a piece of research. So in this context, as I said, it's one of our public contributors, one of our seriously injured rugby players, and one of our researchers. So it's quite interesting to see that how they respond differently to different questions, and also how they respond the same to some questions too. I mean, I remember one thing that stood out was how they both said that the most important thing for them to be part of a process like this was to be present for a clinical breakthrough. And that when the aha moment comes along, they both wanted to be there despite having very different backgrounds. So that's something that really stood out to me as the value of working with consumers.
And I guess the other thing as well on that, one of the barriers of consumers getting involved in research, can be really, really daunting. Are the consumers you're speaking about that you involved with your PPI, were their backgrounds in research, or were they, completely, had nothing to do with research, or just, I guess, ordinary people that are away from the world of research and academia?
Yeah. So again, great question. Initially, the public contributors on our panel, the guys with spinal cord injuries, wouldn't have had a background in research. They'd have been representatives on the IRFU Charitable Trust, which is an organization that looks after the interests of these players. So that's how they were brought to the table. And so the IRFU already had this fantastic network of people who were interested in the research and becoming more involved and engaged in that research. And then, RCSI here, we had the researchers, we had the team and a lot of the facilities available. And then Amber, Advanced Materials for Bioengineering Research, had a lot of the facilities and the capacity to get a project like this going up and running and together. So between the three groups, the three main collaborating groups, they were all able to come together and bring their strengths to the table and accomplish more. But to answer your main question, no, they wouldn't have had a background in research, but they'd have had their own specific knowledge base, which of course, contributes really well to the work that we do.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most important things that I sort of see when I speak with consumers. They're like, I want to get involved in research, but they almost see it as a different world. As like, they're all academics, in labs and have that persona. But the reality is that, anyone can get involved in sort of any aspect of research. It's providing a perspective and an opinion that a lot of people don't have. The other thing that I'm really interested in as well is obviously you're a contributor to our recent publication. And there's a lot of research being done around the world in the area of spinal cord injury and what have you. And we're really lucky to get the opportunity to showcase some of that to people, because that's probably one of the other things that is a barrier, that there's a lot of research being done, published in journals, but not necessarily getting out to consumers. And I know that's something that myself, living with the spinal injury for so long, that you sort of know research is happening, but I almost had to seek it out. So I guess from that point of view, how have you found the response to your piece that was published in our publication, just in general, through the people you work with, the PPI, and just, I guess, the overall response to having spinal research in a non-traditional academic sense being published?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the response has been great. That's the first thing I should highlight. Initially, to get involved in the piece, one of the great things about this panel is, like you said, people are always looking for research and looking for something, and we can share our findings with each other. So this piece, the competition, was highlighted to me by one of my supervisors, Dr. Emer Smith, who herself is a consultant in rehabilitation medicine. So she showed me the competition and said, this might be a good platform for us to share our experiences of PPI, which has obviously been really positive. And, we can use this opportunity to encourage others or maybe open that discussion. But furthermore, in regards to my feedback, it was a really positive experience. But furthermore, it was actually PPI in its own right that we were able to work with the other panel members, because the other panel members contributed on the piece. So while I took the lead in writing it, I was able to bring in the clinicians and the researchers and the injured players to contribute to the article and make sure that it made sense in a layman's terms, in a non-academic publication, or that I had the right mechanisms or I had the right language. So it was a great project for all of us to work together on. And as I said before, the feedback was really, really positive. Within the group, within the panel, it really energized the process, and it really showed the value of PPI and what we're doing. From an external point of view, the feedback on social media was fantastic. A lot of all this stuff is published on Twitter these days. So, even just to see so many likes and retweets for a piece was really, really enjoyable for myself, because it shows what you're writing is kind of getting out there and that people are reading it. So I'd certainly think it's possibly the most popular piece I've written, which was published in the publication. So So the feedback within the group was great. The feedback externally was great, online on social media and things. And finally, from a personal point of view, I found real impact, real benefit from the prize itself, which was a place on the Research Impact Academy training. So I got to attend the workshop over the course of a week. And it was really good for me to be able to get feedback on my project and my PhD, and to get some advice on how I can work with it.
Oh, that sounds all really positive, which is great, because obviously the idea is to showcase the work being done. But as you say, even though you were the lead writer on the piece, that there was so much collaboration going on behind the scenes to make sure it's right, and make sure that it's a true reflection. I guess finally, before wrapping up, obviously you're an advocate of PPI. What would you say to someone who's like yourself, a young researcher, or even an experienced researcher? What would you say to someone that's thinking about getting consumers involved, or a bit unsure? What would your advice be to them, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing I'd say is to think about how you can do it and how you can involve those that you're working with in your research. I would say it's well worth doing and provides a lot of value to a project. We know that there's research out there. The literature does show that it has a fantastic impact on clinical research and on health and social research. If you're working on that side of things, there's plenty of evidence there to show that it improves recruitment, adherence to a research project or medication, creates user-friendly interventions. So we know that it has a really positive impact on clinical research. Whereas my work then looks at preclinical research and where it can have a positive impact there. And the benefits are less known there. There's a limited body of evidence, but there needs to be more. And so I'd hope to add to that throughout the course of my PhD. But I would say to anyone considering doing PPI is that to take a step back and take your time, because you really need to give it that time to form those relationships with your public contributors or your consumers, and to get to know each other. It just takes time to get to know each other and know what works for everyone and what kind of levels people like to engage at. So to have that, like I said, we're 2 years into our panel. So everyone kind of knows each other a lot better now, but the early meetings of that panel were mainly concerned with everyone knowing each other and knowing everyone's role and knowing where everyone can contribute and what they're best at. So that would be my advice, to give it a go. It's not, I know it can seem daunting, but it's incredibly rewarding. The people you work with are fantastic. I can't speak highly enough of them. You learn more about other fields and other knowledge bases that you wouldn't have even considered before. It improves you, I think, as a researcher. I think it improves the quality of your research, and it really grounds you in what you're looking at and gives context. At the end of the day, if you're working with the people that who are most likely to benefit from your research, you really get to feel the end point, the goal, and that accomplishment that comes with something good happening. Like even if it's such as getting this piece published, because I was on the panel and get to interact with the guys regularly, I was able to immediately see the feedback and the enjoyment and the positives that came from that. So give it a go. I know it can be daunting. I know it can be difficult, but look for the groups that already exist. Try to engage with groups that are already there together, because you can accomplish more by coming together than you ever could by yourself, which is kind of the principle of PPI, that together we can do more than we can achieve by ourselves.
No, I definitely agree with everything you've said. And that's obviously what the end goal is as well, to get people involved and have better outcomes and working together. Well, thank you, Pádraig. I've had a really great time in this conversation. If anyone out there would like to check out Pádraig's piece, as well as all the other pieces that were published in our publication, just follow the links below to the Why Research Matters link. And thank you very much.